I should have known something was wrong the moment I heard the doorbell ring at exactly 6:30. We weren't expecting anyone. My lasagna was perfectly golden in the oven. The table was set with our good plates, the ones with tiny blue flowers that my grandmother had given me before she passed. And my two kids, Emma and Jake, were actually getting along for once. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday evening, just the three of us. But there she stood when I opened the door, Patricia Morrison, my ex-mother-in-law, holding a bottle of wine like it was some kind of peace offering. Her silver hair was pulled back in that tight bun she always wore, the one that made her face look even more severe than it naturally was. She was wearing her church dress, navy blue with pearl buttons, and that smile. That fake, poisonous smile I hadn't seen in 3 years. "Hello, Sarah," she said, pushing past me before I could even react. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I was in the neighborhood." The neighborhood. She lived 45 minutes away in the suburbs. There was nothing neighborly about this visit. "Patricia, I started, but she was already walking toward the dining room, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like little hammers. "Something smells wonderful," she called out, as if she hadn't spent the last 3 years telling anyone who'd listen that I was an unfit mother who had stolen her son and grandchildren away from her. Emma looked up from her homework at the kitchen counter, her 8-year-old face scrunching in confusion. "Mom, who's that lady?" That's when my heart broke a little. My own daughter didn't recognize her father's mother. Patricia hadn't seen the kids since David and I divorced when Emma was 5 and Jake was 14. She'd made it crystal clear at the custody hearing that she blamed me for destroying her family and had sworn she wanted nothing to do with that woman's children. Jake emerged from his room, probably drawn by the unfamiliar voice. At 17, he was almost as tall as his father had been, with the same dark hair and serious eyes. He stopped dead in the doorway when he saw Patricia examining our family photos on the mantel. "Grandma Pat?" His voice cracked slightly, caught between the boy he'd been and the man he was becoming. Patricia turned, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine emotion cross her face. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Jacob," she said formally. "My, how you've grown. You look just like your father at that age." The comparison hit me like a slap. David had been gone for 2 years now, a heart attack at 38 that no one saw coming. The kids and I had grieved together, leaned on each other, built something new from the wreckage of our broken family. Patricia had refused to attend the funeral. "What are you doing here?" Jake asked, and I heard the wariness in his voice that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "I came to see my grandchildren, of course," Patricia said, settling herself at the head of the table without being invited. "A woman my age shouldn't be alone on holidays." "It's Tuesday," Emma said quietly. "Every day is a holiday when you're with family, sweetheart," Patricia replied, but her tone was cold. She'd never liked Emma, had always favored Jake because he looked like David. I'd tried to shield Emma from that favoritism when we were still married, but kids notice everything. I stood in the doorway, my mind racing. The lasagna timer would go off in 10 minutes. I had a choice: cause a scene and kick her out, traumatizing my children, or endure whatever game she was playing. "I suppose you can stay for dinner," I said carefully. "But Patricia, why are you really here?" She smiled that fake smile again. "Can't a grandmother want to reconnect with her family? I know we've had our differences, Sarah, but life is too short. I'm getting older and I realize I've been foolish. I want to be part of their lives again." Jake glanced at me, uncertainty written all over his face. He remembered the good times with Grandma Pat, the Christmas mornings, the birthday presents, the way she used to sneak him extra cookies when I wasn't looking. He'd been devastated when she cut us off. Emma, on the other hand, barely remembered any of that. To her, this was just a strange woman in a fancy dress who made her mother's shoulders go tight with tension. "Jake, can you help me set an extra place?" I asked. As we moved around the kitchen, I whispered, "Just be polite, okay? We'll get through this." He nodded, but I could see the questions in his eyes. Why now? Why after all this time? The timer went off, and I pulled the lasagna from the oven, the cheese bubbling and perfect. It was David's favorite recipe, one his mother had taught me when Jake was a baby, and we were all still pretending to be a happy family. "That looks delicious, dear," Patricia said as I served the plates. "Though I remember adding more herbs to mine. But this is lovely too." And there it was. The subtle dig, delivered with a smile. I'd forgotten how skilled she was at making insults sound like compliments. We ate in uncomfortable silence for a few minutes. Patricia made small talk about the weather, complimented the house, though she managed to work in that it was smaller than she remembered, and asked Jake about school. She ignored Emma almost entirely. "So, Jacob," Patricia said, cutting her lasagna with surgical precision, "are you still planning on Notre Dame? Your father always dreamed of you going there." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, I'm thinking about State University. They have a great engineering program, and with Mom's teacher salary and the life insurance money." "State?" Patricia's fork paused midway to her mouth. "But Jacob, you're a Morrison. We don't settle for state schools. Your great-grandfather built Morrison Construction from nothing. You have a legacy to uphold." "Jake's going to make his own legacy," I said firmly. "Whatever school he chooses." Patricia's eyes snapped to mine. "Of course you'd say that. You never understood the importance of family heritage. David always said—" "David's not here," Jake interrupted, his voice steady but cold. "And he's been gone for 2 years. Where were you then, Grandma? Where were you when Mom had to work 2 jobs to keep us afloat? Where were you when Emma had nightmares and asked why Daddy's mommy didn't love us anymore?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's eyes were wide, and I could see tears threatening to spill over. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of. "Jacob Morrison," Patricia said, her voice sharp as glass, "I raised your father to respect his elders. Clearly, your mother hasn't taught you the same values." "Don't." The word came out harder than I intended. "Don't you dare criticize how I've raised my children. You have no right." "No right?" Patricia laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "I have every right. I'm their grandmother. I'm family." "Family shows up," Emma said quietly. We all turned to look at her. She was staring at her plate, her small hands clenched in her lap. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked gently. Emma looked up, and I saw something in her 8-year-old eyes that broke my heart. Wisdom that no child should have. "Family shows up," she repeated, louder this time. "When Daddy died, Mrs. Chen brought us soup every day for a week. Mr. Rodriguez fixed our fence for free. Jake's friend Marcus helped me with my math homework when you were working late. They showed up. You didn't." Patricia's face flushed red. "Emma, you don't understand adult relationships. There were circumstances." "What circumstances?" Jake asked, leaning forward. "What circumstances were more important than being there for your dead son's children?" I wanted to stop this, to protect them from whatever poison Patricia was about to spill, but I also knew they deserved answers. They'd carried the weight of her rejection for years without understanding why. Patricia set down her fork and folded her hands in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was deadly quiet. "The circumstances, Jacob, were that your mother destroyed our family. She turned your father against us, filled his head with lies, and when he died, she made sure we weren't welcome at the funeral. She poisoned you children against us from the very beginning." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Jake's face went white. "That's not true," he said. "Isn't it?" Patricia smiled that cold smile again. "Ask her, Jacob. Ask her why she moved you all the way across town after the divorce. Ask her why she changed her phone number. Ask her why she never returned any of our calls or letters." My stomach dropped. There had been calls, there had been letters, but they'd all been filled with threats, with demands that I give up custody, with cruel accusations about my fitness as a mother. I'd documented everything, had kept it all in a file in case I ever needed it for court. "I protected them from you," I said quietly. From your poison. My poison? Patricia's voice rose. I loved those children. I loved them more than you ever could because they're Morrison blood. They're all I have left of my son. Then why did you call me a whore at the custody hearing? I asked, my voice shaking with remembered pain. Why did you tell the judge that Emma probably wasn't even David's daughter? Why did you try to have my parental rights terminated? Emma gasped. Jake's face went from white to red. Because I was angry, Patricia said, and for the first time she sounded defensive. I was grieving. I'd lost my son, and then I was losing my grandchildren too. People say things they don't mean when they're hurting. For 3 years? Jake's voice was barely controlled. You hurt for 3 years? Patricia's composure cracked slightly. I made mistakes, but I'm here now, aren't I? I'm trying to make amends. Why now? I asked. What changed? She looked down at her plate, and I saw her hands tremble slightly. I'm sick, she said quietly. Cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. The words hit the table like a bomb. Emma made a small sound of distress. Jake sat back hard in his chair. I felt the familiar tug of compassion, the same instinct that had made me marry her son despite all the red flags. That had made me endure years of subtle cruelty because family is family. But then I looked at my children, my Emma, who'd grown up thinking she wasn't good enough for her father's family, and my Jake, who'd blamed himself for his grandmother's rejection, and that compassion hardened into something else. I'm sorry you're sick, I said carefully. But that doesn't erase 3 years of silence. It doesn't undo the damage you did to my children. Our children, Patricia corrected. They're Morrison children. No, Jake said, standing up suddenly. His chair scraped against the floor with a harsh sound that made Emma jump. No, we're not. Patricia looked up at him in surprise. Jacob, what are you talking about? Of course you are. You're David Morrison's son. I was, Jake said, his voice steady and strong. But when you decided that being a Morrison meant cutting us out of your life, I decided I didn't want to be one anymore. He walked over to the kitchen counter where I kept important documents in a wooden box David had made in high school shop class. I watched, confused, as he pulled out a manila folder I'd never seen before. Jake, I said. He turned back to the table, holding the folder like it was something precious. I've been working on this for 2 years, he said, his eyes never leaving Patricia's face. Ever since I turned 16 and could start the process myself. He opened the folder and pulled out an official-looking document. My heart stopped as I recognized the seal of the county courthouse. It's a petition for legal name change, Jake said. From Jacob Morrison to Jacob Pierce, Mom's maiden name, I want to be part of a family that actually acts like family. The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia stared at the document like it was written in a foreign language. You can't, she whispered. You can't just stop being a Morrison. Watch me, Jake said. I turn 18 in 4 months. This will be final then, but I wanted to start the process now. I wanted to choose while it still felt like a choice instead of just running away. Jacob, please, Patricia said, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her voice sounded genuinely desperate. I know I made mistakes, but you're my grandson. You're all I have left of David. No, Jake said firmly. I'm not all you have left of Dad. I'm my own person. And Emma's not just some leftover piece of him either. We're people, not monuments to your dead son. Emma looked up at Jake with something like awe in her eyes. Can I do that too? Change my name? Emma, honey, I started, but she shook her head. I want to be Emma Pierce too, she said, looking directly at Patricia for the first time all evening. I don't want to be part of a family that doesn't want me. Patricia's face crumpled. I never said I didn't want you. You didn't have to say it, Emma replied with 8-year-old logic. You showed it. Chapter 2. The Weight of Truth. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Patricia sat at the head of our table, David's old seat, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her perfect composure was cracking, and underneath I could see something that might have been genuine pain. But I'd learned the hard way not to trust Patricia Morrison's pain. She wielded her emotions like weapons, always had. When David and I were married, she'd perfected the art of the guilt trip, the strategic tear, the carefully timed breakdown that would send him running back to her side every time. "You don't understand," she said finally, her voice thick. "When David died, I felt like I was dying too. He was my only child, my whole world. And then at the funeral." She trailed off, but I knew what she was remembering. The funeral had been a nightmare. Patricia had shown up drunk, had caused a scene, had screamed at me in front of the whole church, that it was my fault David was dead, that the stress of our divorce had killed him. "You blamed me," I said quietly. "At the funeral, in front of our children, you blamed me for his death." "I was wrong," Patricia whispered. "I know that now. But I was so angry, so hurt. I needed someone to blame, and you were. You were there. You were alive when he wasn't." Jake sat back down, but he kept the folder in his hands like armor. "That doesn't excuse 3 years of silence. 3 years of rejecting us." "I didn't reject you," Patricia said desperately. "I tried to call. I sent letters." "Threatening letters," I corrected. "Letters saying you were going to sue for custody, that you were going to prove I was an unfit mother. Letters telling me I should give up the children to you because you could provide a proper Morrison upbringing. Is that what you call trying to connect?" Emma looked between us, her eyes wide. "She wanted to take us away from Mom?" Patricia's face flushed. I thought you'd be better off with me. I have money, connections. I could give you things she couldn't." "Like what?" Emma asked, her voice small but challenging. "Could you give us hugs when we had nightmares? Could you help us with homework? Could you hold us when we cried about Daddy?" Patricia faltered. "I would have learned. I would have—" "No, you wouldn't have," Jake said, his voice steady and sure. "Because you don't see us as people, you see us as things, as ways to keep Dad alive, or ways to hurt Mom, or ways to make yourself feel better. But you don't see us." He was right, and we all knew it. Even Patricia seemed to recognize the truth in his words, because she didn't argue. I looked at my son, this young man who'd grown up too fast, who'd been forced to become the protector of our little family when his father died, and felt a surge of pride so fierce it took my breath away. When had he become so wise? When had he learned to see people so clearly? "There's something else," Patricia said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I never told you, about why I was so angry, why I fought so hard to keep the children." My stomach clenched. With Patricia, there was always something else. Always another layer to her manipulation. "What?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Patricia looked around the table, her eyes lingering on each of our faces before settling on her hands. "David came to see me the week before he died," she said. "He was different, sad. He said he'd made mistakes, that he should have protected you and the children from me. He said he was ashamed of how I'd treated you during the divorce." My heart skipped. David had never stood up to his mother, not once in our entire marriage. It had been one of our biggest fights. "He said he was going to call you," Patricia continued, still not looking up. "He wanted to try again. He said he'd finally realized that I'd been poisoning him against you for years, filling his head with doubts and suspicions that weren't true. He said he wanted to be a real father to Emma, and he wanted to fix things with Jake." Jake's face went very still. "Dad was going to call?" "The next day," Patricia nodded. "He had a heart attack that night. He never got the chance." The words hung in the air like a physical weight. I felt tears burning behind my eyes as I thought about all the might-have-beens, all the healing that could have happened if David had lived just one more day. "So you see," Patricia said, finally looking up, "when he died, I lost not just my son, but any chance of making things right. And I was so angry at God, at the world, at you. I blamed you for taking him away from me, but the truth is, I drove him away all by myself. Why are you telling us this now? I asked. Patricia's laugh was bitter. Because I'm dying, and I'm tired of carrying his guilt along with my own. Because I've spent 3 years realizing that everything he said was true. I did poison him against you. I did try to destroy your marriage. I did everything I could to make you miserable because I couldn't stand the thought of sharing him. Emma reached across the table and touched Patricia's hand with one small finger. That must have made you very sad, she said in her matter-of-fact way. Patricia looked down at Emma's tiny hand on hers and started to cry. Not the dramatic, manipulative tears I remembered, but quiet, broken sobs that shook her thin shoulders. It did, she whispered. It made me sadder than I've ever been in my life. And meaner, and lonelier. Then why didn't you stop? Jake asked, but his voice was gentler now. Because I didn't know how, Patricia said simply. I've been angry for so long, I forgot how to be anything else. And by the time I realized what I'd done, what I'd lost, I thought it was too late. I thought you'd all hate me forever. We don't hate you, Emma said softly. We just don't know you. The simplicity of it was devastating. My 8-year-old daughter had just summed up 3 years of family dysfunction in 7 words. I looked at Patricia, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. She looked fragile, not manipulatively fragile, but genuinely breakable. Her hands, which had always been so perfectly manicured, were thin and spotted. Her face, which had always been so carefully composed, was creased with lines of pain and regret. She was dying, and despite everything she'd put us through, despite all the hurt and anger and sleepless nights, she was family. Broken, toxic family, but family nonetheless. What do you want from us? I asked quietly. Patricia wiped her eyes with a napkin, leaving streaks of mascara on the white linen. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know if I have the right to want anything. I don't want to die alone. And I don't want to die with all this anger between us. Jake looked at the folder in his hands, then at Patricia, then at me. I'm still changing my name, he said firmly. That doesn't change because you're sick, but maybe we could figure out how to be family again. Different family, better family. I'd like that, Patricia said, her voice barely audible. I don't know how, but I'd like to try. Emma slipped out of her chair and walked around to Patricia's side of the table. With the fearless compassion that only children possess, she climbed into her grandmother's lap and wrapped her thin arms around her neck. We could start with hugs, she said simply. And Patricia Morrison, the woman who had tried to destroy my life, who had rejected my children, who had spent 3 years making us feel like we weren't good enough, hugged my daughter back and cried like her heart was breaking. Maybe it was. Chapter 3, The Unveiling. 2 months later, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when the phone rang. It was barely 7 a.m. on a Saturday, never a good sign. Mrs. Pierce? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. This is Sarah Pierce, yes. This is Margaret Williams from Williams, Donnelly and Associates. We're Mrs. Patricia Morrison's attorneys. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. My stomach dropped. Patricia had been coming to dinner every Tuesday for 8 weeks now. The visits were still awkward, still tense, but something was slowly shifting between us. Emma had started calling her Grandma Pat again, and Jake had begun showing her his college applications, asking for her opinion, even though he was still planning on state. Is she? I couldn't finish the question. She passed peacefully yesterday evening, the attorney said gently. She was at home. Her housekeeper found her this morning. I sank into a kitchen chair, the phone pressed to my ear. I see. Mrs. Pierce, I'm calling because Mrs. Morrison specifically requested that you and the children be informed immediately. She left some things for you. Documents and personal items she wanted you to have. Would it be possible for us to meet this week? Documents. With Patricia, there were always documents. Of course, I said numbly. When would be convenient? We scheduled the meeting for Wednesday afternoon. I hung up the phone and stared at the coffee maker, trying to process the fact that Patricia Morrison was gone. After all these years of looming over our family like a storm cloud, she was just gone. Mom? Jake appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking up at impossible angles. Who was on the phone? Sit down, honey, I said gently. The conversation with the kids was one of the hardest I'd ever had. Emma cried, real, heartbroken tears for the grandmother she'd just started to know again. Jake was quieter, more complex in his grief. He was sad, but also angry that they'd wasted so much time. Angry that Patricia had died just when things were starting to get better. It's not fair, he said, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. We finally had a chance to be a real family again, and now she's just gone. Sometimes life isn't fair, sweetheart, I said, pulling him down onto the couch next to me. Sometimes all we can do is be grateful for the time we did have. 8 weeks, Jake said bitterly. We had 8 weeks. But they had been 8 important weeks. Patricia had started bringing old photo albums to our Tuesday dinners, sharing stories about David's childhood that the kids had never heard. She'd helped Emma with a school project about family history, teaching her about the Morrison side of the family tree. She'd even started talking to Jake about engineering, admitting that maybe State University wasn't such a terrible choice after all. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It was something more complicated than that. It was a recognition that people could change, that families could heal, that love could exist alongside hurt and anger and disappointment. The funeral was small. Patricia had outlived most of her friends, and the extended Morrison family had never been close. But we were there. Jake wore his father's old suit, the one I'd been saving for his graduation. Emma wore her best dress, the navy blue one with tiny white flowers that Patricia had complimented just the week before. We sat in the front row, the 3 of us, and I felt the weight of finality settling over everything. Patricia Morrison was gone, and with her went any chance of fully understanding the complex woman who had shaped so much of our family's story. After the service, we drove to the law office in downtown. Williams, Donnelly, and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass tower, all polished wood and expensive artwork. Margaret Williams was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading us into her office. "I know this is a difficult time." She handed me a thick manila envelope with my name written on it, in Patricia's careful handwriting. "Mrs. Morrison was very specific about these items," Margaret said. "She wanted you to have them, and she wanted me to explain the circumstances under which they were created." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside were several documents, some official-looking, some handwritten. The first thing I saw was a letter addressed to me in Patricia's handwriting. "Sarah," I read aloud, my voice shaking. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Margaret is doing what I asked her to do. I want you to know that the last 2 months have been the happiest I've been since David died. Watching you with Emma and Jake, seeing what a wonderful mother you are, seeing how strong and loving and resilient you've made our family. I wish I had told you sooner how proud David would be of you." I had to stop reading. The words were blurring through my tears. Jake reached over and took the letter from my hands. He cleared his throat and continued. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I caused you and the children pain that can never be fully healed. But I hope you can understand that everything I did came from love for David, even when that love was twisted and selfish and wrong." He paused, his own voice getting thick. "Jake," he read, "I hope you'll reconsider changing your name. Not because I think you owe me anything, but because Morrison is your father's name, and he was a good man despite his mother's failures. But whatever you choose, I want you to know that you are exactly the kind of man he would have been proud to call his son." Emma had climbed into my lap and was listening intently. "Emma," Jake continued, You are the light of this family. Your father loved you completely from the moment you were born, and I was wrong to ever make you doubt that. You have his kindness and your mother's strength, and you're going to do amazing things in this world. Jake set the letter aside and picked up the next document. His face went white. What is it? I asked. He handed it to me without a word. It was a bank statement, an account I'd never seen before in Patricia's name, but with Emma and Jake listed as beneficiaries. The balance was $847,000. I don't understand, I whispered. Margaret leaned forward. Mrs. Morrison set up this account the day after your husband's funeral. She's been depositing money into it every month for the past 3 years. Her pension, her Social Security, the rental income from some properties she owned. She lived very modestly so that she could leave everything to the children. But why? I asked. She cut us off. She wanted nothing to do with us. That's not entirely true, Margaret said gently. She hired a private investigator to keep track of you. She knew about Jake's grades, about Emma's school plays, about your promotion to department head. She knew about every hospital visit, every teacher conference, every milestone. She just didn't know how to be part of it. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. A private investigator? Margaret nodded and handed me a thick file. Monthly reports for the past 3 years. She kept track of everything. I opened the file with shaking hands. Inside were photographs: Jake at his track meets, Emma at her dance recitals, me at school board meetings. There were copies of report cards, newspaper clippings of Jake's academic achievements, programs from Emma's school performances. She'd been watching us. All this time, she'd been watching us. There's more, Margaret said quietly. She pulled out another document. She also left this. It was a letter addressed to the children, in Patricia's handwriting but clearly written recently. Jake took it and read it aloud. My dear grandchildren, by the time you read this, I will be gone, and I hope I've had the chance to tell you in person how sorry I am for the years we lost. I want you to understand that my absence from your lives was never because I didn't love you. It was because I loved you so much that it made me crazy with fear and jealousy and selfishness. He paused, swallowing hard. I was afraid that if I shared you with your mother, I would lose the last pieces of your father. I was afraid that if I admitted I was wrong about the divorce, I would have to face how much pain I had caused. I was afraid that if I reached out to you, you would reject me the way I had rejected you. So I stayed away, and I watched from a distance, and I told myself it was better for everyone. Jake's voice was getting steadier as he read, as if Patricia's words were giving him strength. But it wasn't better, it was cowardly, and it cost us 3 years that we can never get back. I hope you can forgive a foolish old woman who let pride and fear rob her of the greatest joys in her life, being your grandmother. He folded the letter carefully. The money is for your futures, he continued reading from another page. For college, for your first homes, for whatever dreams you want to pursue. But more than that, I hope it's proof that you were never forgotten, never unloved, never anything less than the most precious parts of my heart. The silence in the office was absolute. I looked at my children, my brilliant, compassionate, resilient children, and saw them processing this revelation that their grandmother had never really abandoned them at all. She was watching us the whole time, Emma said softly. The whole time, I confirmed. Jake was staring at the bank statement. This changes things, he said quietly. Does it change your mind about the name change? I asked gently. He considered this for a long moment. No, he said finally. But it changes what it means. I'm not changing my name because I'm angry anymore. I'm changing it because I want to honor the family that raised me, that stuck by me, that showed up every day. But I'll remember where I came from. I'll remember him, and now, I'll remember her differently too. Margaret handed me one final envelope. This is the deed to her house, she said. She left it to you, Mrs. Pierce, along with a note. I opened the small envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a single line in Patricia's handwriting. For the family you built from love instead of fear. Chapter 4. Coming Home. 6 months later, I stood in Patricia's kitchen, my kitchen now, watching Emma help Jake pack for college. He'd gotten a full scholarship to State University's engineering program, plus enough from Patricia's account to cover his living expenses, and then some. Emma was simultaneously proud of her big brother and devastated that he was leaving. "You'll visit every weekend," she demanded, folding his t-shirts with 8-year-old precision. "Every other weekend," Jake negotiated, "and I'll call you every day." "Promise?" "Promise." The house still felt strange to me. Too big, too formal, too full of memories that weren't mine. But the kids loved it. Emma had claimed the sunroom as her art studio, and had already covered every surface with her drawings and crafts projects. Jake had set up a workshop in the garage where he tinkered with electronics and built model airplanes. We kept some of Patricia's furniture, donated most of it, and slowly started making the space our own. The dining room where she'd sat that first Tuesday night was now painted a warm yellow instead of formal beige. The living room had comfortable couches and family photos instead of antique furniture and expensive art. But in the master bedroom, I'd kept Patricia's vanity exactly as she'd left it. Her perfume bottles, her jewelry box, her brush and mirror set, all of it unchanged. I couldn't explain why, except that it felt important to preserve some trace of the woman who had given us so much more than we'd ever known. "Mom," Jake called from upstairs, "can you come here for a minute?" I found him in his new room, holding a small wooden box I'd never seen before. "I found this in the closet behind some old photo albums," he said, setting it on the bed between us. The box was made of dark wood, polished smooth by years of handling. There was no lock, just a simple brass clasp. Jake opened it carefully. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to different people in David's handwriting. My heart stopped as I recognized the paper, the expensive cream stationery David used to use for important correspondence. "What are these?" I whispered. Jake picked up the one on top. It was addressed to me in David's careful script. "For Sarah, to be opened only if something happens to me." My hands shook as I took the letter. Below it were others, one for Jake, one for Emma, one for his mother, even one for my parents. All dated just 3 days before he died. "He knew," I said softly. "Somehow, he knew." With trembling fingers, I opened my letter. David's voice seemed to speak from the page. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then my heart finally gave out the way the doctors said it might. I know you'll blame yourself. You always take on too much responsibility for things beyond your control, but I need you to know that loving you and our children has been the greatest joy of my life, even when I was too weak to show it properly. I've been a coward, Sarah. I let my mother poison our marriage because I was afraid of losing her love, and in doing so, I nearly lost yours. I let her make you feel small and unwelcome in our family, because I didn't have the courage to stand up to the woman who raised me. I failed you in so many ways, and I failed our children by not giving them the united family they deserved. But I want you to know that every day I lived with the regret of not protecting you better. Every day I wished I could go back and be the husband you needed, the father Jake and Emma deserved. You gave me a love I never thought I was worthy of, and I repaid it by choosing the easy path instead of the right one. Take care of our children, raise them to be brave in ways I never was. Teach them that love means standing up for each other, even when it's hard. Show them that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice and commitment and showing up every single day. I love you, Sarah. I loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you beyond whatever comes next. Don't let my mother's bitterness poison your heart the way I let it poison mine. She's hurt and afraid and doesn't know how to love without controlling. Maybe someday she'll learn. Maybe someday you can help her learn. All my love, always, David. I was crying so hard I could barely see the words. Jake put his arm around me and pulled me close. "Read mine," he said quietly, handing me his letter. "Jake," it began, "you're 17 now, becoming a man. and I'm so proud of the person you're growing into. You have your mother's strength and compassion, and I hope you have my determination without my weakness. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. Your grandmother's treatment of your mother and Emma was wrong, and my failure to stop it was worse. I let fear make me complicit in hurting the people I loved most. Don't make my mistakes, son. When you love someone, protect them. Stand up for them. Choose them every single day. You're going to do great things in this world. I can feel it. But more than your achievements, I'm proud of your character. You're already a better man than I ever was. Take care of your mother and sister. Not because it's your job, but because that's what family does. And remember that being a Morrison isn't about a name or tradition or what other people expect. It's about choosing to be the kind of person who builds up instead of tears down, who protects instead of abandons, who loves instead of fears. I love you, son. Make me proud. Jake was crying now, too. We sat there on his bed, holding each other and David's words, finally understanding the full weight of what Patricia had carried all these years. There's one more thing, Jake said, reaching into the box. At the bottom was a small velvet ring box. Inside was Patricia's wedding ring, the simple gold band she'd worn for 43 years until David's father died. Attached to it was a note in her handwriting. For Emma, when she's old enough to understand that love is a choice we make every day, not a feeling we wait to feel. Emma appeared in the doorway, drawn by our voices. Why are you both crying? She asked, climbing onto the bed between us. We found some letters from Daddy, I said, smoothing her hair. Letters he wrote before he died. What do they say? Jake and I looked at each other. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her father had finally found his courage just days before losing his life? How do you tell her that her grandmother had spent 3 years carrying not just her own guilt, but his as well? They say he loved us, I said simply, and that he was sorry he didn't always show it the right way. Emma nodded solemnly. Like Grandma Pat. Yeah, Jake said, his voice rough. Like Grandma Pat. 2 weeks later, we drove Jake to college. Emma insisted on bringing a care package that was mostly cookies and drawings she'd made. Jake pretended to be embarrassed, but I saw him carefully pack every single picture in his dorm room. As we were saying goodbye, he pulled me aside. I've been thinking, he said, about the name change. My heart sank. After everything we'd learned, everything we'd discovered about Patricia's love and David's regrets, I'd hoped. I'm still going to do it, he said, and my disappointment must have shown on my face because he quickly continued. But I want to add Morrison as a middle name, Jake Morrison Pierce, so I carry both families with me. I hugged him so tightly he complained I was embarrassing him in front of his new roommate. Your dad would be proud, I whispered. Yeah, he said. I think Grandma Pat would be too. On the drive home, Emma was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke up from the back seat. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. When I grow up and get married, will you promise not to be mean to my husband like Grandma Pat was to you? The question hit me like a physical blow. I pulled over at the next rest stop and turned around to face her. Emma, I said carefully, what makes you ask that? I don't want to have to choose between you and someone I love. It seems really hard. Out of the mouths of babes. My 9-year-old daughter had just identified the central tragedy of our family story with perfect clarity. I promise, I said solemnly, when you're old enough to choose someone to love, I will trust your choice and welcome them into our family. Even if they're different from what I expected. Even if I don't understand them at first. Even if it's hard for me. She smiled. Good, because I might marry someone really weird. I laughed despite my tears. I hope you do, sweetheart. I hope you marry someone absolutely wonderful and weird who makes you laugh every day. As we drove the rest of the way home, I thought about cycles and choices, about the ways families can break and heal and break again. I thought about Patricia, alone in that big house for 3 years, watching us from a distance because she didn't know how to bridge the gap her own actions had created. I thought about David, writing letters he hoped we'd never need to read, trying to find courage on paper that he'd never found in life. And I thought about my children. Jake, choosing to carry both families in his name, because he understood that people are complex and love is complicated. Emma, already wise enough to ask for the promise Patricia never made, the promise that might have saved us all years of pain. That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat in Patricia's old room and wrote a letter of my own. Not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, to whatever force governs second chances and forgiveness, and the messy, beautiful work of being family. I forgive you, Patricia, I wrote. Not because what you did was okay, but because carrying anger is too heavy, and life is too short, and love is too precious to waste on grudges. I forgive you for the years we lost, and I forgive myself for not trying harder to find a way back to each other sooner. I forgive you, David, for being human and flawed and afraid. For choosing the easy path when the right path was hard. For leaving us before you could make all the amends you wanted to make. And I forgive myself for not being perfect, for not having all the answers, for sometimes choosing pride over peace and self-protection over connection. I sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in the wooden box with David's letters. Someday, when Emma and Jake are older, maybe I'll show it to them. Maybe it will help them understand that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing, or pretending things weren't as bad as they were. Forgiveness is about choosing to write a different ending to the story. It's about deciding that love is stronger than hurt, that grace is more powerful than judgment, that families can be broken and still be worth fighting for. 6 months later, Jake came home for Christmas break with his first semester grades, all A's, and a girlfriend named Maria who made Emma laugh and helped me cook dinner without being asked. When I watched them together, I saw what David had written about in his letter. Jake choosing love over fear, protecting what mattered to him, building up instead of tearing down. Emma, now 10, had started a school project about family trees. She included everyone, David and Patricia, my parents, all the branches and connections that made us who we are. At the top, she drew 3 figures holding hands, her, Jake, and me. Underneath, she wrote, "Family is the people who show up." It's become our family motto, the truth we've learned through loss and forgiveness, and the long, slow work of healing. Family is the people who show up. Not just once, not just when it's easy, but again and again, through all the messy, complicated, beautiful chaos of loving imperfect people in an imperfect world. Patricia showed up in the end, in the only way she knew how. David showed up in letters written with a heart full of regret and hope. Jake shows up every time he calls his sister, every time he comes home for dinner, every time he chooses connection over distance. Emma shows up with her fierce 8-year-old, now 10-year-old, wisdom, her ability to forgive without forgetting, her instinct to hug first and ask questions later. And I show up every day, choosing to be the mother my children need, the woman David believed I could be, the person Patricia might have been, if she'd learned sooner that love grows when it's shared, not hoarded. We're not a perfect family. We never were, and we never will be. But we're a family that shows up. We're a family that chooses each other, again and again, through all the ways we fall short and let each other down and mess up the beautiful, impossible work of loving each other well. And in the end, I think that's enough. I think that's everything. The house is quiet now. Emma is asleep upstairs, probably dreaming about her art projects or the book she's reading, or the boy in her class who makes her giggle. Jake is back at school, building the life David dreamed he would build, becoming the man we all knew he could be. I'm alone in the kitchen that used to be Patricia's, in the house that used to represent everything that was wrong with our family, and now represents everything that's right. Tomorrow is Tuesday. I think I'll make lasagna, the recipe Patricia taught me when Jake was a baby, and we all still thought love was simple. Maybe I'll invite the neighbors. Maybe I'll call my parents. Maybe I'll just set the table for the family I have, the one that shows up, the one that chooses love over fear, the one that believes in second chances and third chances, and as many chances as it takes to get love right. Maybe I'll light a candle for the ones who can't be here, For David, who found his courage too late, and for Patricia, who found her way back to us just in time. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, I'll remember that this is what family looks like. Not perfect, not easy, but present. Always showing up, always choosing each other, again and again and again. Sometimes the families we choose are the ones we're born into. Sometimes they're the ones we build from scratch. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they're the ones we learn to forgive, to heal, to love again, despite all the ways we've hurt each other. In the end, family isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. It's about staying. It's about choosing love, even when love is hard. Especially when love is hard. Epilogue. 5 years later. The doorbell rings at exactly 6:30 on a Tuesday evening, and for just a moment, my heart skips the way it used to when unexpected visitors arrived. But then I hear Emma's voice calling from upstairs. "Mom, Maria's here for dinner." I smile, wiping my hands on my apron before opening the door. Jake's girlfriend, fiancé now as of last month, stands on the porch holding a bottle of wine and that warm smile that won our hearts 3 years ago when Jake first brought her home. "Sorry I'm a little late," Maria says, stepping inside and giving me a hug that smells like the vanilla perfume Emma helped her pick out last Christmas. "Traffic was insane coming from the hospital." Maria's in her final year of nursing school, and she works part-time at the children's ward downtown. She has the kind of natural compassion that reminds me of Emma, the ability to see past people's defenses straight to their hearts. "Jake's in the kitchen," I tell her, "probably burning something." She laughs. "I'll go rescue dinner." As she heads toward the sounds of controlled chaos coming from the kitchen, I think about how naturally she's become part of our family rhythm. She remembers Emma's piano recitals, brings Jake his favorite coffee when she visits, and somehow always knows exactly what to say when I'm having one of those days where missing David feels like a physical ache. "Mom," Emma calls again, "can you come help me with something?" I find her in her room, the former sunroom that she's transformed into a teenage sanctuary of art supplies, band posters, and the organized chaos that seems to follow creative 15-year-olds everywhere they go. She's standing in front of her mirror, holding up 2 different earrings. "Which ones?" she asks, turning to face me. She's grown so tall this past year that we're almost eye to eye now. Her face has lost the soft roundness of childhood and is developing the elegant bone structure she inherited from David's side of the family. But her eyes, those are pure determination, pure Sarah Pierce stubborn streak. "The silver ones," I say, reaching over to straighten the collar of her dress. "They bring out your eyes." "That's what I thought too." She puts on the earrings, then hesitates. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think Grandma Pat would have liked Maria?" The question catches me off guard, the way Emma's insights always do. She has this ability to cut straight to the heart of complicated emotions with startling clarity. I consider the question seriously. Patricia Morrison, with all her pride and prejudices and need to control. Maria Santos, first-generation American, studying to be a nurse, from a big, loud, loving Mexican family that bears no resemblance to the quiet formality Patricia valued. "I think," I say carefully, "that Grandma Pat would have been suspicious at first. She would have worried that Maria wasn't traditional enough or wealthy enough, or whatever arbitrary standard she'd set up in her mind." Emma nods. She remembers enough of Patricia's visits to understand. "But," I continue, "I also think that Maria has the kind of strength that eventually would have won her over. The way she loves Jake, the way she's patient with you, the way she shows up for this family without ever being asked. I think even Grandma Pat would have had to admit that Jake chose well." "Good," Emma says with satisfaction. "Because I really love her. And I want Jake to be happy." "He is happy, sweetheart, can't you tell?" We can hear laughter coming from the kitchen, Jake's deep chuckle mixing with Maria's musical giggle, and the sound of something sizzling in a pan. "Yeah," Emma says, smiling, "I can tell." Dinner is Jake's attempt at Patricia's lasagna recipe, which he's been working to perfect ever since he graduated college last year and moved back home to start his job with the city engineering department. It's not quite right yet, a little too much oregano, not quite enough salt, but it's close enough that I can taste the love he's put into it. So, Jake says, cutting into his slice with the careful precision he brings to everything, Maria and I have been talking about the wedding timeline. Emma perks up immediately. She's been planning their wedding in her head since Jake proposed, complete with sketches of potential dress designs and detailed seating charts. We're thinking maybe next fall, Maria says, reaching over to squeeze Jake's hand. October, when the leaves are changing. Something small, just family and close friends. Can I be the maid of honor? Emma asks, bouncing slightly in her chair. Actually, Maria says, her eyes twinkling, we were hoping you'd be our wedding planner. You're the only person we trust to make it perfect. The look of pure joy on Emma's face is worth every chaotic moment that's about to follow. My artistic, detail-oriented daughter with a wedding to plan. Jake and Maria have no idea what they've just unleashed. I have so many ideas, Emma says, already reaching for her phone to start a new note. What's your budget? What kind of flowers do you like? Do you want a band or a DJ? Are we talking church ceremony or outdoor? Beach theme or rustic? Emma, I laugh. Let them finish their dinner first. But Jake and Maria are grinning at each other, clearly delighted by Emma's enthusiasm. There is one thing, Jake says, his tone shifting to something more serious. Something we wanted to talk to both of you about. My stomach tightens automatically. After years of unexpected revelations and family drama, I've developed an instinct for when conversations are about to take a turn. We've been thinking about names, Maria says gently. For after we're married, but also, well, for our kids someday. Okay, I say carefully. Jake looks directly at me. I know I changed my name to Pierce, and I'm proud of that choice. But Maria and I have been talking, and we want our children to have some connection to Dad's side of the family too. Not Morrison necessarily, but... He trails off, pulling out his phone and showing me a document on the screen. We want to name our first son David, he says quietly. David Pierce Santos, if that's okay with you. The words hit me like a physical force. I have to set down my fork because my hands are suddenly shaking. Jake, I whisper. I know it might be hard, he says quickly. Having a little David around, I mean. But I want there to be a piece of Dad in our family's future. I want our kids to know where they came from, who their grandfather was, even if they can't meet him. I'm crying now, the kind of tears that come from places so deep you didn't even know they existed. It's not hard, I managed to say. It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Emma is crying too, and Maria has tears in her eyes. Jake looks relieved and emotional, and so much like his father in this moment, that it takes my breath away. There's something else, Maria says softly. We want to ask if you'll help us plant a garden at the new house. Vegetables and flowers, the kind of garden Dad would have loved. Jake's been telling me about how he used to help him in the backyard when he was little. The memory surfaces instantly. David in his old jeans and work shirt, patiently teaching 5-year-old Jake how to plant tomato seedlings, while Emma toddled around the yard collecting dandelions. It was one of the few times David seemed completely relaxed, completely himself. He would have loved that, I say. He would have loved all of this. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, each of us lost in our own thoughts about the past and the future, and the strange, wonderful ways families grow and change and carry forward the best parts of the people they've lost. You know, Emma says suddenly, I think we should put Grandma Pat's rose bushes in the new garden too. Jake looks surprised. Her rose bushes? The ones in the backyard here, Emma explains. The pink ones she planted when Dad was a baby. They're still blooming every spring. I think she'd like knowing they were part of a new beginning. It's such a perfectly Emma suggestion, practical and sentimental at the same time, honoring the complicated legacy of a complicated woman. I think that's a wonderful idea, I say. We'll transplant them this fall, before the wedding. Speaking of the wedding, Maria says, turning to Emma with mock seriousness, how do you feel about pink roses in the bouquet? And just like that, we're back to wedding planning, with Emma pulling up Pinterest boards on her phone and rattling off ideas about color schemes and venue decorations. But underneath the chatter, I can feel something settling into place, another piece of our family's healing, another layer of love covering the old scars. Later, after Jake and Maria have gone back to their apartment, and Emma is upstairs doing homework, I sit in the kitchen with a cup of tea and Patricia's old photo albums. I do this sometimes, especially on Tuesdays, trying to understand the woman who shaped so much of our story. Tonight, I'm looking at pictures of David as a little boy, gap-toothed and grinning, covered in mud from whatever adventure had consumed his afternoon. In one photo, he's maybe 6 years old, standing proudly next to a small garden plot with a hand-painted sign reading, David's Vegetables. Patricia is kneeling beside him, actually smiling, her usually perfect hair mussed and her hands dirty from helping him plant. I study her face in that picture, trying to reconcile this woman who clearly adored her little boy with the bitter, controlling person she became later. What happened to that joy? What happened to that easy, uncomplicated love? Maybe that's the real tragedy of our story. Not that Patricia was incapable of love, but that somewhere along the way she forgot how to love without fear, how to share without losing, how to let go without feeling abandoned. I think about the garden Jake and Maria want to plant, about little David Santos who doesn't exist yet but already has a place in our hearts. I think about Emma, wise beyond her years, wanting to include Patricia's roses in this new beginning. Maybe that's how healing really works, not by forgetting the past or pretending it wasn't painful, but by taking the good parts forward and leaving the rest behind. Taking David's love of growing things, Patricia's beautiful roses, the lessons learned from all our mistakes, and planting them in new soil. The phone rings, interrupting my thoughts. It's Jake. Mom, sorry to call so late. I just wanted to say, thank you for being okay with the name thing, and the garden and all of it. I know it's a lot. It's not too much, I tell him. It's exactly right. Good. Oh, and Mom? Maria's mom wants to meet you next weekend. She's driving up from Phoenix. I hope that's okay. I smile, remembering my promise to Emma years ago about welcoming the people our children choose to love. I can't wait to meet her, I say. Should I make my famous lasagna? Jake laughs. Maybe stick with your chicken enchiladas. Less pressure to live up to family standards. After we hang up, I put away the photo albums and turn off the kitchen lights. As I head upstairs, I pass Emma's room and hear her on the phone with one of her friends, animatedly describing wedding dress ideas. No, not poofy, she's saying. Maria's too elegant for poofy. Something simple but stunning. Think Grace Kelly, but with a little bit of modern edge. I smile and continue to my room. In the morning, Emma will probably present Jake and Maria with a complete wedding plan, color-coordinated and budgeted down to the last detail. Jake will pretend to be overwhelmed while secretly being impressed by his sister's organizational skills. Maria will hug Emma and tell her she's perfect, which will make Emma glow for the rest of the week. And I'll watch all of this unfold with the deep satisfaction of knowing that this is what family looks like when it's working right. Not perfect, not free from problems or complications, but present for each other. Showing up, choosing love, again and again. Tomorrow is Wednesday, which means Emma has piano lessons after school, and Jake is coming by to fix the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. Maria might stop by too if her shift ends early. We'll eat dinner together and talk about ordinary things, school projects and work deadlines, and whether we should finally replace the old dishwasher. It will be beautifully, wonderfully normal. The kind of normal I dreamed about during those dark months after David died, when I wasn't sure our little family would survive all the ways we'd been broken. But we did survive. More than that, we grew. We learned. We became the kind of family that creates space for everyone, even difficult grandmothers and complicated histories, and the messy, imperfect work of forgiveness. I think David would be proud of what we've built from the pieces he left behind. I think Patricia would be amazed by the garden that grew from the seeds of her late-blooming love. And I know that somewhere in the future, a little boy named David Pierce Santos will grow up hearing stories about the grandfather he never met, and the great-grandmother who loved him from a distance. In a house full of people who understand that families aren't just born, they're chosen day after day in 1,000 small acts of courage and grace. That's the real ending to our story. Not the dramatic revelations or the tearful reconciliations, but this. The quiet Tuesday evenings, the shared meals, the phone calls just to say, "I love you." The decision to keep showing up for each other through all the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up a life. This is what love looks like when it finally grows up. This is what family becomes when people decide that connection matters more than being right, that grace matters more than pride, that love, messy, complicated, imperfect love, is always, always worth the risk. Always.